This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval, brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. This week, we're keeping things in the family, staying with the Scoop fam, bringing on our leader himself, Marc Givler. Marc, thanks for joining me on the show this week.
I feel very honored to be on this. This is a big deal.
Yeah, usually you and Bank have me as a guest to talk some recruiting, but I felt, with the season ending and some things starting to heat up, that it was a good time for to give the people what they want and talk about some recruiting things. So, we'll talk about a few guys, a couple 2021 recruits, some 2022 guys, and then you were recently down in Florida with Ohio State playing the national championship, but doing a little recruiting coverage down there as well with South Florida Express and up to IMG Academy. So we'll touch on that before we let you go. Let's talk about, I guess, the big story of the week. By the time people are listening to this, it will probably be Friday. Raesjon Davis and his parents will be making their way out from California to Columbus to check out Ohio State. It's really interesting because they can't meet with the staff. They can't go to the football facilities, nothing that's not open to the public. They're not allowed to go to. So this is really a trip for Raesjon and his parents. Raesjon's been to Ohio State before. He's seen everything, you could see as a recruit, but his parents haven't been. So this is their chance to go check out the city of Columbus, the campus area, obviously looking at some of the facilities as much as they can from the outside, I guess. They'll be able to talk to the Ohio State staff on the phone as much as they want during this trip by calling them, but they won't be able to see them in person. So, Marc, I know you and Bill, and I was definitely leaning this way too, kind of had this one done to USC for a few weeks now. My theory, for me, I had posted on the board. My thing was always like, I don't think as good as a job Al Washington has done, I don't think Raesjon's coming to Ohio State unless he visits Columbus. And that's happening on his own dime. So what do you make of this situation? Do you still see him as I don't want to say a done deal, but a pretty good shot to USC, or is this changing your thinking a little bit?
Well, it definitely changes the math a little bit for me, just because I didn't think he was going to be making the visit. I mean, it looked like he looked like he was going to be for a while, and then it never happened. And even, the kind of the people that were optimistic, that were kind of talking to me the last 6 months about this and, saying, hey, watch Raesjon Davis. Even they, the last few weeks, were like, I don't think so. And so that's when I took a step back and was like, wow, this really sounds good for USC right now. And, the Clay Helton situation is a little more stable than it was at this time a year ago. And it's really hard to beat. Quite honestly, it's really hard to beat USC for SoCal kids, as long as USC is not just a total mess. So, but the fact that he's doing this is really big. It kind of keeps them on life support, at least in terms of trying to get this done. It feels like this might be more for the parents at this point, just because Raesjon's been to Ohio State twice. Now, the last time he was in Columbus, it was kind of I think it was maybe a couple of hours at the most. Kind of a swing through with some of his 7-on-7 guys, and then they were visiting a lot of different schools. And I don't know that was a great environment really to kind of make a big move. So I guess in that sense, it's been a little bit longer since he's really got a chance to see things. But it feels like this might be more for the people around him in terms of, hey, we're okay with the Ohio State decision if that's what it's going to be, but let's go take a look and just make sure that we would be comfortable with that if that's the way he wants to go. But I still think USC is the odds-on favorite, but this is definitely interesting.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I think either there's some cold feet late in the game, and let's get out to Ohio State just to make sure that we're making the right decision with USC, or I think it's a matter of, and you and I discussed this, it's a matter of, the kid maybe, and I don't think the parents are against Ohio State, but obviously USC is home and it's comfortable, and you got guys, a good friend in Corey Foreman going there. They have a little bit of momentum, I think, going with the solid season that they had. And I think it's maybe the kids saying, I kind of want to go to Ohio State, and the parents being like, well, we haven't seen it yet. So let's get out there if that's where you want to go. And it will be interesting to see what comes out of this weekend. And obviously Ohio State coaches are going to be talking to Raesjon, and so maybe we'll be able to get some information about how people inside the WAC are feeling after this visit. And I know you talked to Raesjon's father. I talked to Raesjon a little bit, so we'll see what we could get, and obviously bring you guys everything on Buckeye Scoop. But that's going to be interesting to watch. But I think another situation to watch is another kid in the 2021 class from the West Coast. I would say, given I think Ohio State's need on the defensive line, arguably one of the most important recruits outside of Jack Sawyer to Ohio State in this class from the start, JT Tui Maloau, a defensive lineman from the state of Washington. And we've had Ohio State as the favorite for quite some time. Alabama's right there, though. They are a realistic threat to land JT. Washington, I mean, they just lost their defensive coordinator, I believe, to Texas. So that probably puts a little bit of dent in there. I know Oregon, USC have been in the mix as well. I want to hear what your thoughts are on JT just a few weeks away from signing day. I know that you've been reporting that this one could go past signing day. He might want to take some visits. I know there's been some scuttlebutt also, though, the last couple of days that he might decide on National Signing Day. What's the latest you're hearing with JT?
Yeah, I'm expecting a delay, if you want to call it that. Knowing that any day in the next 2 weeks he could wake up and say, you know what, maybe I don't want to wait until April, May, June, whenever it's going to be to take visits. Maybe I don't want to do that. But right now, the people that I've talked to about this are expecting him to not sign on signing day. It's just one of those things where it's like, okay, if he doesn't sign on the 3rd, he can sign any time beyond that. I mean, he doesn't I think people are under this impression that, well, if he doesn't sign on the 3rd, then he's definitely waiting until April, May, or June. Well, no, I mean, the 3rd is kind of that first day he can sign. But if he wants to make a decision on March 5th, let's say he waits, 4 or 5 weeks after the signing day in February, and he's like, you know what, I don't want to give this another 2 months. I just want to pick my school now. He can do that. So this is a thing that I think once February 3rd hits, if he doesn't sign on February 3rd, you really just have to look at it as a day-to-day thing. I mean, it's obviously a sign that maybe he wants to try and hold out, but he can pretty much end it February 3rd on. He can just get a feeling or whatever, have a conversation or whatever that changes the math for him. But, right now I'm hearing that he really wants to take the visits. And that's what the expectation is. I think Ohio State is expecting him to wait, but again, we'll see what happens. It's timing. I hate playing the timing game. It's just, even when signing day coming up, it's so ridiculous. Kids can do whatever they want whenever they want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I think it sounds like right now we're not expecting. I think the expectation is the earliest the NCAA will allow visits is the middle of April. Now, they're not going to wait till April 14th to say we're extending the deadline past April 15th. They are probably going to make that decision in March. So to your point, he might wait a month after signing day to kind of see, okay, is this thing actually going to happen in April? Is it going to be pushed back to June? If that's the case, maybe I just make my decision now. I could see that scenario playing out. I think, you wait till early March and you kind of see what's going on, but we'll see. It will be interesting. I think, would you agree with me? I think it's a good thing for Ohio State if he does go ahead and make a decision and signs on February 3rd.
Yeah, I think that's the favorite right now. And quite honestly, I think with the visit thing, I really think it's a matter of principle at this point. I think he just wants to do it, just kind of very similar, maybe not exactly the same, but not too different from Emeka Egbuka, who, when he visited Oklahoma and everyone was kind of freaking out, I was like, look, I've been telling myself for months I'm going to do this, so now I'm going to follow through on that. I think that's kind of where things are at right now, and I think it's more so not so that I think there's part of it that he needs to see Ohio State just because, you're talking about blindly going a couple thousand miles from home. But I think just as much of this is the fact that I think even if Ohio State's got the advantage right now, which I believe they do, I believe they've got actually a fairly significant advantage. I think he's going to maybe want to stack up another school or two to Ohio State, where he can say, okay, let me make sure that maybe it's not Alabama or USC or Oregon, and let me make sure that I'm putting something up against Ohio State as well, and the relationships he has there with some of the coaches and some of the guys on the team. So it's gonna be very interesting. I think, I'm not advising him, obviously. It's not my position, but I think he kind of has to ask himself if he's willing to wait until June, because I think it's very possible that April 15th could get moved to June 1st. And then at that point, you're looking at a week or two of visits and then a decision. So I think the real question in his mind right now kind of has to be, are you willing to hold out until the middle of June? Because that may be what it takes if he wants to take all the visits.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. He hasn't been to Ohio State to make that big of a decision without having been to a place. I completely understand, his positioning, and, this is a big decision that will not only affect the next 3 to 4 years of his life, but well beyond that. But I do agree that Ohio State is in the driver's seat. I think it probably benefits them if he has to make an earlier decision and can't take visits. You don't want to give Nick Saban a chance to get that kid on campus and give him the whole song and dance and try to sway him a little bit. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting. Definitely a lot to watch as we approach signing day on Buckeye Scoop over the next couple of weeks. Last couple of things here. I want to talk Will Johnson. I reported in my A deck. Mick then followed up in his Mick at Night. Talked about it a little bit with Tom Moore on the Morning Scoop. But I'm hearing that that Ohio State is now the favorite to land Will Johnson. I think it's a combination from what I understand in talking about sources on the Ohio State and Michigan side of things. As number one, Ohio State's doing a great job in recruiting him. Kerry Coombs is leading that one, and we all know how good of a recruiter he is. I also think the history and track record of Ohio State putting defensive backs in the NFL in the early rounds and then having success in the NFL is there for Will as well. But then I also think it's probably more so to me the Michigan situation. Defensive staff turnover, relationships are not there. There's a lot of questions about the future of Jim Harbaugh in Ann Arbor. Anytime your head coach gets his salary cut in half and his buyout taken away, it's not a good sign for the future of that relationship. So I think there's a lot of question marks around the future of the Michigan program. To Will Johnson, his dad, Dion, who's a alumnus and played football for the Wolverines. So from what I'm hearing right now, Will Johnson is favoring Ohio State over Michigan and USC. And some people are telling me that a decision could come sooner versus later. I'm not completely buying that. I think he could end up waiting things out and seeing what happens with Michigan a little bit and seeing, some of the relationships there. But Mark, what are your thoughts on Will Johnson, who's one of the top cornerbacks in the class, which is a huge position of need for Ohio State?
Yeah, I've been a little slow to kind of maybe come around on that idea, but it's getting really hard to ignore at this point. The momentum Ohio State seems to have there. I really think the Harbaugh situation the last 2 months or whatever it's been has been very detrimental to Michigan with this kid. I said this about Texas too. You at some point you have to make a decision. You either have to extend your coach or you have to move on. And the way Michigan kind of left this up in limbo, where he didn't have a contract extension, he didn't, they weren't sure what direction they were going. Other schools are going to do enough to try and create uncertainty around your program on the recruiting trail. When you're publicly creating your own uncertainty, it's really the worst thing I think you can do. I've always said, if you're not sure, you need to make a move then. And they didn't do that. And, we saw, I think it certainly helped Ohio State get Quinn Ewers from Texas when they couldn't figure out what they were doing. And I think it's cast a lot of doubt here on the way this was handled and how long Jim Harbaugh is going to be there. And if you're a recruit, you have to be looking at that going, well, they didn't have a great year on the field. They've struggled against Ohio State the last few years. Now I don't know, now we have a new coach, we have new assistant coaches on both sides of the ball. We have basically an entirely new defensive staff. How long is the head coach going to be there? That's a lot of questions to answer. if you're if you're Jim Harbaugh, to try and tell these kids. And yeah, I think if something happens soon, I think it would almost have to be Ohio State. And if this gets kicked down the road, I think it pulls Michigan back into the game more, where it's like, okay, clearly this kid has some very strong feelings about Michigan and is very feels very strongly about the program and wants to see things succeed there and wants to see this play out and see how they do. I think that would be kind of telling, kind of where his mind is at, because obviously if it's in the next few weeks, I don't see that it's Michigan.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm like you. It's hard for me to come around on this one just because he's a legacy. He grew up in Detroit. He's a fan of Michigan. Like this kid should be going to Michigan the same way Ohio State fans would expect, Jack Sawyer to go to Ohio State or, other kids like that. I mean, this is even beyond Jack Sawyer because Jack's dad didn't play for Ohio State. So I've had a trouble coming around, but all the intel I'm getting, I mean, it just points to this. But we heard the kind of the same things about Damani Jackson a few months ago, and you saw all the crystal balls pour in, and then me and you were sitting there saying we're not buying this. I think you probably had some similar conversations to me with some people at Ohio State where they're like, we're not buying it either. And this one though, it just seems a little bit different. I think, you talk about a kid from California versus a regional kid, and we'll see. It's going to be interesting to watch this one. And I agree with you. I think if something happens the next few weeks, I think it is going to be Ohio State. And I still think they're going to have to fight for him through signing day, because if Michigan has a good year on the field and things seem to be a little bit more stable and Harbaugh is not going to the NFL and the new defensive staff is building a good relationship with him, even if you get the commitment now, that could be in danger later on. Like we saw Ohio State have to fight for Mike Weber a few cycles ago to the end when Harbaugh came in. So let's keep an eye on this one. We'll keep you guys updated on the scoop. Last thing we'll end the show with before letting Mark go is his little trip down to Florida. He spent time in South Florida. He spent time, I guess you would call it kind of like Northwest Florida a little bit, Central West Florida, in Bradenton, at IMG Academy. Tell us just a little bit about your trip and some of the things you picked up down there.
Yeah, so we actually got a really good look at some of the South Florida Express guys, the young guys. Their veteran rosters kind of set right now, but they had their like 15 and under tryouts going on, and two really impressive guys. Well, there were a lot of really impressive guys, but two that I found very interesting. Earl Kulp is a 2024 receiver, defensive back, probably receiver. He's at St. Thomas Aquinas, has not yet had a chance to really make his mark at that program yet. That's not a program you break into as a freshman. So he's going to be working his way hopefully into the mix this year. From Canton, Ohio. Sister went to Canton McKinley. Family are Ohio State fans. Lots of family still in Ohio. So that's one that's interesting to me. Really strong receiver, just got very strong build, strong hands. Made a lot of really impressive plays in their little scrimmage session they had. So that's a guy for me that if he continues to develop, and there's no reason to think he won't at Aquinas, that's when you look at as, okay, if Brian Hartline and the Buckeyes are interested, that's a kid you can get. That's the kid there's still so much family there in Canton area. So that would be a natural fit there if he continues to develop and put some tape out there this fall. Another guy, this guy's not on the Ohio State radar at this point, but he's going to be, I think, and that's just gonna be a matter of, if he's kind of a Southeast guy or not. But JoJo Trader, similar to Culp, a receiver defensive back, he's going to be at Monsignor Pace in Miami. Going to be a sophomore. He, I think, is going to be a breakout guy this year. It's funny. We talked to him. I wrote about him in my column a week or two ago. And since that time, Georgia was his first offer. So that's a huge first offer to get. Georgia just offered him here, I think it was yesterday or the day before. So the word is getting out on him. He's about 6 feet tall, but he's got really long arms, and it makes me wonder if he can't be 6'2", 6'3" down the road. But you want to talk about a natural pass catcher. Oh my goodness. Just some of the catches he made in traffic, the ability to go up and get the ball and just snatch everything was so effortless. intriguing as a defensive back too because of the length, but definitely a guy who I think is going to be a national type of guy. And again, I think that got validated very quickly there with the Georgia offer. So those are some interesting guys from South Florida Express. They've got another guy, Brandon Ennis, who's going to be a big time national recruit in 2023, maybe a 5-star kid. He was not there. I do know Ohio State's very much interested in him. So that's going to be another guy to watch. IMG's kind of interesting right now. I've heard Katron Allen, probably not at this point, the running back prospect in 22. I think I don't know. I don't want to say no one got dropped here, but I think Allen probably has some schools a little bit higher on his list than Ohio State. I think Ohio State kind of looked at that and was like, well, we kind of like Singleton and Alston and those guys, and maybe we need to just kind of move on to more realistic options. One guy at IMG, though, that I think they like more than people think is the Tyler Booker kid, the offensive tackle. I don't know if it's super realistic. He's a Northeast kid originally, so he's not a Florida kid. Made their top 10, made the top 10 for him. I think Ohio State is trying to push there. I know Zach Rice and Cam Dewberry and guys like that are getting a lot of the internet hype and attention right now, but I think Booker's up pretty high up on the list. And then the other guy, your neck of the woods, Jihad Campbell, edge guy. I think they're still trying to kind of figure out what their defensive end board is right now. In 22, I think, they're a little bit behind on the evaluations, missing camp, and Larry Johnson is just so adamant about seeing these kids in person that I think they're still trying to figure that out. But I sense Campbell is getting momentum. He told me he's very high on Ohio State. He put out I forget if it was 10 or 12. He put out like a top 10 or 12 like back in November, but Ohio State hadn't offered yet. They weren't on the list. And I kind of asked him about that. Well, that's obviously if there was a do-over situation today, Ohio State would obviously be on that list. I sense they're one of his top 3 or 4 schools at this point. So that's going to be one to watch because I do think Ohio State is intrigued by him as well. I think that's a kid that maybe we haven't been talking about a lot who could emerge more here the next few months.
Yeah, Jihad Campbell, the move to IMG, I think, actually helps Ohio State. He had told me he was going to make a decision soon, and I don't think Ohio State was ready to take him at that time. This was about a month and a half ago. I don't think Clemson was ready to take him at that time either. But I do think Penn State would have taken him for sure at that time, and I think that they were going to be the pick, with maybe Rutgers being second as far as who was going to take him. But now you move to IMG. You didn't do that for no reason. I mean, obviously you want to develop as a player, but I think you're going to get, I would say, more national attention. And he has a pretty good offer list already, but I think he's going to be able to prove out to some schools like Ohio State or Clemson or some of the bigger schools that, he can play there. And, he's going to be going against better competition. He's going to have a real kind of strength coach putting weight on him, which I think is definitely one of the things he needs. He's more of a slender frame type of kid. So I think Ohio State having a little bit more time, as you said, to figure out their defensive end board with him is going to go a long way as far as, do they decide to take him or not? And I think if they do decide, I think to your point, they do have a really good chance. With Tyler Booker, he's a kid. He's from Connecticut. He played at Bergen Catholic for a season before going down to IMG. So I know him fairly well. He actually started out as a defensive tackle prospect. Now everyone's looking at him as an offensive tackle, which I think is probably a smart move for him from a money situation wise long-term. And I agree with you. I think Ohio State is high on him. And from what I am told, I think he's actually pretty high on Ohio State. I think they definitely need to get him out for a visit when things open up, but I can see this recruitment going a long way. I think he's going to be an official visit type of kid. I don't think he's going to pull the trigger early. So it's going to be interesting to see. Sounds like an awesome trip that you had, though. Definitely better weather than I had in New Jersey or the folks in Columbus had, even though I heard it wasn't too hot. I heard there was some 60-degree weather days, but still better than cold and snowing. So awesome that you got down there. I'm sure there will be more to come on some of those guys that you reported on, but thanks again, Mark, for joining the show. Great stuff. As everyone knows, you can read my insights, Mark's insights, mix Bills on recruiting on the site, BuckeyeScoop.com. If you're not a member, give us a try, even just 1 month. Check it out. I think everyone who's come on board has been pretty pleased with the value they're getting for their $13 a month, even less if you do an annual. So give us a try. Check out Buckeye Scoop, but we will see you next week. This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. Check out revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington.